A crystal ball, also known as an orbiculum or crystal sphere, is a crystal or glass ball and common fortune-telling object. It is generally associated with the performance of clairvoyance and scrying in particular. Many of us only have the modern day as a reference, but even in ancient times, humans were fascinated by the prospect of being able to predict the future. I want you to remember for a second, when was the last time you were in a heated argument? When was the last time you were in a toxic relationship? When was the last time you bought a losing lottery ticket? Now imagine, what would your life be like had you known ahead of time the solution to that argument? What would your life be like had you ended that toxic relationship earlier, or avoided it altogether? What would your life be like if you knew which lottery ticket was a winner? Being blessed with this ability would undoubtedly allow you to turn the tides in a major conflict. It would make the quest for romance no more difficult than deciding what you want off of a menu. And it would surely bring with it great fortune and riches beyond your wildest dreams. After all, one who can determine what will happen before it happens will have ultimate control over their destiny and the destiny of others. Simply making predictions is nothing new, and some are taken more seriously than others. We all know that not everything that is forecasted comes to pass, yet undeniably there seems to be exceptions. Many individuals throughout history have claimed to possess this skill. To each their own, and everyone has the right to their opinions on the future. But the problem is, these individuals tend to build their audience out of the inexperienced, most of the time targeting those with levels of desperation that surpass their levels of knowledge. And often it is discovered later down the road that these prophets, in fact, possess no more insight into the events of the future than you or I. Some would argue that a correct prediction of events occurring in the future is a result of nothing more than a sheer coincidence. In other words, it was simply a lucky guess. Don't get me wrong though, there's no harm in putting yourself out there and taking a guess, educated or not, and if one chooses to follow these forecasters, that is entirely their decision. But what you need to know is that there's a type of prediction that has evolved. In this instance, I'm talking about Bitcoin predictions. Once innocent and fantastical speculations now too often find themselves fueled by greed and the pursuit of an uneducated audience to monetize. That doesn't sound ideal, but how did we get here? It couldn't have always been this way. It would seem that natural progression and a perfect storm of variables have led us to where we find ourselves right now. But hold on, am I saying that real fortune tellers don't exist? Well, let us find out. Naturally, we should start at the beginning. For those of you who are just now dipping your toes into the new technological era and age of digital currencies, here's a very brief and somewhat simplified explanation behind the largest cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a blockchain-based form of transferring value. While many people confuse Bitcoin and blockchain for one and the same, it's because they are closely intertwined, yet they are very different technologies. Bitcoin does not equal blockchain. Blockchain, in its purest form, is the definition of democracy. It is an ideal, democratized system in which a record of transactions are kept. In the case of a cryptocurrency, these transactions are really no more than transfers of information that represent value. It is similar to how an ATM tells your bank account that you have deposited your paycheck and then the value of that paycheck. However, on the blockchain, the number that the ATM communicated to your bank needs to be verified. This is done democratically across several other computers on the network to avoid one central point of control. These participants are called validators, or you can call them nodes. These nodes work to increase security within the network as a whole and simultaneously prevent fraud and tampering with the values being transferred. On the other hand, we have Bitcoin. It's an ever-evolving culmination from years of work in the form of time-tested mathematical code that controls how the transactions of value on a blockchain are performed. In order to make a realistic prediction, you must understand the workings behind what you're discussing. Bitcoin has never been a scam or part of a get-rich-quick scheme, like many refer to it as. It's simply the technology that was created with the best of intentions to give monetary control back to the people. Now that we're caught up, understand that a currency utilizing blockchain technology controlled by the people becomes highly resistant to manipulation. Manipulation is a negative consequence that we've seen with countless government-controlled currencies, and it's a wonder we still trust the same systems to receive payment in, to hold all we've worked for, our monetary value, our life savings. In fact, to date, there is no government currency that has withstood the test of time, and all the active government currencies that appear to have done so are only worth a fraction per unit of what they once were. Meanwhile, a currency that cannot be manipulated will no longer be at the risk of the same inflation that we experience day by day in modern currencies. More importantly, its value will not be diminished by mishandling or the excessive printing of new money by a Federal Reserve. It cannot be denied now that cryptocurrencies have started to find a place within the world. Even if that place is only as a speculative asset class, it is likely that one day they'll move beyond speculation and find legitimate uses in society, if only just a select few. So it is no surprise that many of Bitcoin's value predictions of the past have seen themselves come true. But what I think we all want to know is, who are these people that seem to know of Bitcoin's monetary success years before it had happened? What did they know? What do they know now that we don't? Throughout the years you might have heard, this rock, it's shiny and it's unique. This coin, it's old and it's rare. This instrument is one of a kind and it has a signature. This collectible is limited edition and it's no longer being made. Now, what do all these examples have in common? The people who own these things may very well just enjoy the feeling of owning rare and unique items, but often, for those who have the foresight, the end game is always the same. I'm sure that if I'm to hold on to this item long enough, in the future, it will have a much higher value. Whether that value comes from the item's utility or is pure speculation, value is value. And what makes something valuable? Demand. The early days of Bitcoin were extremely uncertain. In terms of demand, there was very little. People with an interest in the cryptocurrency were few and far between, and those who understood its concepts were even more scarce. I'm willing to bet you've probably seen these kinds of posts on social media. What would you do if you had a time machine? What would you tell your younger self if you could travel back in time? If you could live one day in the past, 10 years ago, what would you do? You'd no doubt notice that the overwhelmingly common response is, it seems so easy, but this absolutely wasn't overly obvious at the time. We all know that hindsight is 20/20, and Bitcoin, it's no exception. Buying a strange form of internet currency with little to no infrastructure, zero possibility of transaction reversal, and almost nothing to actually purchase with once you had it, was definitely no obvious decision back in the day, to say the least. Nevertheless, the ones who did, these pioneers, as some might call them, didn't have some sort of special insight that we don't. They were simply introduced to Bitcoin at an opportune time, either through friends or family members, through digital and online marketplaces, or on dedicated sites such as bitcoincharts.com or bitcointalk.org. Once they were introduced, they simply purchased Bitcoin, or more preferably, learned enough information and then bought Bitcoin, as the ones who learned were the ones who stayed. And they were the ones who kept on staying even in the face of hardship. Most of these individuals were scattered across the globe, yet found themselves united by a single ambitious idea. It all came down to recognizing their distrust in the ways of the current financial structure and understanding that this new cryptocurrency has never before seen benefits. For a time, the mentality of Bitcoin owners was primarily occupied by an interest in the technology. This led to early predictions, motivated by the real-world potential of one day having Bitcoin become the new standard form of currency, or even store of value. To someone from today, looking back, it might seem as though the ones making these predictions could in fact see the future, when, in reality, these predictions were made in good faith and were even somewhat whimsical for the time. But they were honest. It turns out no one had a crystal ball. They were simply educated. They educated themselves and gained experience. They knew the state of the world we lived in, and they were a tad, or maybe a lot, hopeful for the future of a currency that was the first of its kind. This genuine mentality, it still exists today. The distributed ledger technology, the sole essence of Bitcoin, still has its supporters, evangelists even. That being said, as time passes, Bitcoin continues to increase in value, and more predictions, they seem to come true. This just so happens to be the natural order of things in a free market, but in the same token, we begin to see a new level of destructive behavior come to light. This behavior, while not motivated by malicious intentions, has proven to have very serious consequences for both you and I. It can be very misleading. It can be costing you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Have you been able to identify it? Have you taken the precautions? For the majority, it started off as simple news coverage, with little more than an update on the market or discussing their favorite project. Over time, this helped increase the reach of cryptocurrency, and it was important for the space. The more places to find condensed information and informative coverage, the better. But at a certain point, we started to drift. The narrative has shifted away from the technology of Bitcoin and the feasibility of cryptocurrencies as networks. With the increase in their value, it may come as no surprise. The primary focus became their value. It was no longer what can be achieved, it was what can we gain. This mindset has begun to permeate its way through much of our day-to-day news coverage, even affecting platforms with the largest of followings. Inherently, this is not a bad thing. It's simply natural. Wanting to benefit from the success of something you're now involved in? What better way to drive a level of adoption than to have everyone and their grandmother speculating on an asset's price? I can guarantee you, you've probably had family members ask you about cryptocurrency this year. Family members, friends, coworkers, who've never really shown an interest before. A rapid price rise and increase in speculation gives people something to talk about, get excited about, and a universal reason to spread the word. To a certain degree, this can be a good thing. Though what has become alarming is that this activity has gone beyond what is healthy for a market. Any market really, and it's entered into dangerous territory. It does need to be understood though, that the danger, it isn't in store for Bitcoin. Fundamentally, the underlying technology of Bitcoin hasn't changed. It won't be negatively impacted by a change in value or from speculation. If anything, it draws attention to the space. It allows for increased development and better infrastructure. Where the danger lies is with those who are new to the space. As a newcomer, you look for guidance, as you should. It's best to try to learn as much as you can, especially if you plan to put money on the line. Thankfully, we live in a digital age where information is readily available within seconds, and so this allows anyone who wants to know more about a subject the opportunity to do so. At the same time, not only can information be accessed, but it can also be easily published within seconds, by anybody. What this has done is allowed channels with large followings to instantaneously convert themselves into cryptocurrency advisors and guide their audience into purchasing cryptocurrencies that often they themselves are aligned with. This can negatively affect the thousands of newcomers arriving into the space who take the initiative to learn more. They make the effort and they seek out someone who presents themselves to be more knowledgeable, thinking they're getting an education or being advised by a reputable source, when in fact, they're being misled. They end up being pushed towards certain cryptocurrencies with no fundamentals or little to no future, usually by someone who is looking to profit off of increased traffic to a certain crypto that they're involved with or that they hold. And what is equally as possible is that they're listening to someone who knows little more about the space than they do. You may come to me and say, hey, I listened to so-and-so who matches this description you've just talked about, and I made X amount of money, so clearly you're wrong. For sure, yeah, that can definitely happen, but the reality is that in a bull market, when everything is in the green, it's very difficult to lose money if the price is what we're focused on. Hence the term bull market, where things charge upward and onward like a bull. It is all too common that a project may not even be of good quality on a fundamental level, but because it has so much hype surrounding it, and many people know about it, it can perform very well. All I'd recommend is that you double check where you're getting your information from, especially if the source has only begun discussing cryptocurrency within the last year to year and a half. Regardless of the size of their following, take what they have to say with a grain of salt. If they aren't simply providing the information and laying out the facts for you to decide on your own, then you're probably being done a disservice. Predictions may definitely come true. As time passes, I can't deny that. But for those shamelessly and endlessly forecasting the rapid appreciation of their favorite coins, I get that you're excited, or that you want to make money. But consider this. Is a couple $1,000s in profit worth discarding a future of lower fees, increased monetary autonomy, international trade, and the further development of digital technologies that benefit the people more than they do the powers that be? Personally, I would like to think so. Once we understand the realities of our current environment and understand the concepts behind new technologies, making our own predictions doesn't seem as difficult as it once was. A currency with democratic principles that is resistant to devaluation and inflation over the long term begins to make sense. It comes down to making a gamble. The currency that you choose to hold your value in, does it possess enough beneficial properties that other people, once introduced to it, are willing to place value in it too? Will its value be held long term? For us to see a new, revolutionary form of currency, it has to evolve beyond a group of diehard fans and enthusiasts and it must one day be recognized seriously by a much larger group of people. Interestingly enough, the government-controlled currencies that we've witnessed firsthand to deteriorate and be susceptible to manipulation are still in widespread use across the globe. Perhaps the likes of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have been romanticized beyond their practical capacity. Perhaps there's a realistic alternative. Or perhaps only the crystal ball gazers know. Wow. I'd be hard-pressed to believe anyone's made it to the end, but if you did, you're insane. Just kidding, you're actually pretty awesome, and I appreciate you more than you know. This was my first commentary, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit how many hours I spent on this, so I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. That being said, if you somewhat enjoyed it and want to watch me improve as I make future content, consider giving the video a like. You could even subscribe to say you were here at the beginning. That's about it. Thanks for spending a video's length of your time with me, and I'll see you in the next one.